So we're going to continue now, and we're on this chapter about knowledge. Now, many of you have taken this before, so there's a benefit in the repetition, and maybe some of you haven't taken this information before. So let's just go ahead and read it. The author says, may Allah have mercy on him. Knowledge, ilm, is the attribute of a knower, an alim. It is impossible to confirm one and deny the other. You can't confirm knowledge and deny a knower. Nor can you confirm a knower and deny knowledge. Here is, first of all, so that's rational truth. Because knowledge is an attribute. An attribute cannot be independent. So needs a self. An attribute needs a self. And the knower, that's the description of a self. That's a description, that's a descriptive name of a self that has an attribute that validates this description. Which attribute validates this description? Knowledge. So knowledge is the attribute of a knower. And the knower is someone who has knowledge. So that's a mental, rational fact. Based on this, when you have such a matter, then it's valid to say this about the Creator and about the creation without comparing them. Still not a comparison. So we say that Allah is attributed with knowledge, therefore He is a knower. We say that Allah is a knower, therefore He is attributed with knowledge. And we say that a creature, like a human or an angel or a genie, has knowledge, therefore He's a knower. And if He's a knower, then He has knowledge. This is still not comparing the Creator to the creation, because the knowledge in both cases is different. So the knower in both cases is different, like we're going to read now. In one case, the knowledge is eternal, and in the other case, the knowledge is created. So, in one case, the knower is eternal, and in the other case, the knower is created. And this is one of those cases of using the same word with a different meaning. Doesn't mean the same thing. How does it mean the same thing? To remind you, similarity is confirmed by the validity of substitution. By the validity of substitution. That means if one can stand for the other, if one can take the place of the other, then they are similar. But if one thing cannot take the place of the other thing, then they are unsimilar. They are dissimilar. Unalike, dissimilar. Can the knowledge of the eternal Creator be valid or suitable for the created being? No. Can the knowledge of the created being stand for the knowledge of the Creator? No. Then they are dissimilar and unalike, even though we're using the same words here. By uncreated knowledge, Allah knows everything known. He knows everything known. So now we just established three things. We established knowledge, we established knower, and we established known. All three of those are different. Knowledge is the attribute of the knower, and the known is that which pertains to the knowledge. No one shares this attribute with Allah, and eventual knowledge happens to some creations. Eventual means created. Knowledge happens to some creations. The word eventual and the word happens, they mean the same thing. Yani, we could say, for example, happening knowledge is an event for some creations. It means the same thing. So eventual knowledge, created knowledge, happens to some creations. Their knowledge is a transient property. The knowledge of the creations is a transient property. That means temporary, temporal, bound by time, susceptible to increase and decrease, their knowledge is, and their knowledge is limited. None of that is true about the knowledge of God. His knowledge is not a transient property, his knowledge is not a transient property. His knowledge is an eternal attribute. And his knowledge is not susceptible to anything. It's not susceptible. So it doesn't increase or decrease, and his knowledge is not limited. Imam al-Tahawi said, لِأَنَّ الْعِلْمَ عِلْمَانِ, there are two types of knowledge. عِلْمٌ فِي الْخَلْقِ مَوْجُودٌ, knowledge that's accessible to the creation. وَعِلْمٌ فِي الْخَلْقِ مَفْقُودٌ, and knowledge that is inaccessible to the creation. So if you wanted to translate this just as literally as you could, you'd say, knowledge that's present in the creation and knowledge that's missing or absent from the creation. And by studying, I came to this translation. I found that these words of Tahawi have some nuance to them. It's not just as simple as they seem to translate. So that's why I translated it this way. Knowledge accessible to the creation. That means knowledge the creation has access to. Knowledge that's achievable for the creations. And knowledge that's inaccessible to the creation. Yani knowledge that's unachievable for the creation. فَإِنْكَارُ الْعِلْمِ الْمَوْجُودِ كُفْرٌ, denying accessible knowledge is blasphemy. And claiming inaccessible knowledge is blasphemy. We'll explain inshallah ta'ala. Denying accessible knowledge is blasphemy. Like, an example of that is like denying that the world exists. That's blasphemy. And claiming inaccessible knowledge is blasphemy. Like claiming to know when Judgment Day will occur. That's blasphemy. Belief is not confirmed until one accepts accessible knowledge and does not seek the inaccessible knowledge. Knowledge accessible to the creations is what Allah made a way for them to gain. And He made it possible for them to know, including religious sciences and worldly disciplines. Religious sciences like what? Like the knowledge of the creed, the knowledge of religious rules, and other religious sciences. Like the science of tasawwuf. That's a real religious science, as opposed to the Wahhabis. The Wahhabis deny tasawwuf altogether. And worldly disciplines like mathematics and trades. Trades, I mean by that, like carpentry and electrical work, plumbing, that type of work. Being a blacksmith, for example. What is that? Tasawwuf, yani Sufism. That's the knowledge of the secrets of the heart. And the knowledge of the secrets of the actions. Good actions and bad actions. Learning that is praiseworthy, both of those. Learning religious sciences, that's praiseworthy. That's an achievable knowledge for creations. And also worldly disciplines, learning worldly disciplines, that's praiseworthy, but not at the expense of religious sciences. Not to disregard religious sciences and only invest in worldly disciplines, that's not praiseworthy. Because the religious knowledge that's going to save you in the afterlife. The worldly disciplines are not going to save you in the afterlife. If you're an electrician, that's not going to save you in the afterlife. But if you have your religious knowledge and also you have your worldly disciplines, then learning that is praiseworthy and will help you in the afterlife if you correct your intention. Learning worldly disciplines is a communal obligation. There must be some Muslims who know medicine, who know math, who know architecture, and those types of things. Languages other than Arabic. We have our very prestigious university global university. MashaAllah, has a religious division and has, one might say, a worldly division. And that worldly division, they are preparing very important Muslims for the service of the Muslims. People who are learning very important things, even if they're not studying religious sciences, and they take their studies very seriously. They are very well educated, very well disciplined brothers and sisters, very smart and very respectable. If you have some children, you're going to put your children in religious sciences, and some of them, you're going to put them in the worldly sciences. You're going to look into their talents and look into their aptitude, and then put them where they should be for the benefit of the Muslims. No, that university is in Lebanon, the one that I mentioned for you. However, some accessible knowledge is forbidden, like philosophy, magic, and astrology. Philosophy, falsafa, that's haram. That's the correct judgment about philosophy. But some Muslims think it's not haram. Correct saying that it is haram because it's harmful. Falsafa is a craft. Philosophy is a craft. One might call it even a sort of a game, something that you might know how to play it or you might not know how to play it. So if you know how to play it, then what you're going to do, you're going to be someone who thinks out of the box intentionally. Not think inside the box, think outside of the box. That means think in an unorthodox way. We talked about that before. I don't want to stick here for a long time. But the falsafa is going to cause you to deny what's observable. That's bad. And it's going to cause you to confirm what's unobservable. That's the crux of philosophy. Falsafa, philosophy. Magic, that's haram to learn it and to teach it. Magic is wicked words and wicked actions by which Allah creates a result. Wicked words and wicked actions by which Allah creates a result. This is haram also because it's harmful. And astrology, here you have a question. Is astrology a type of philosophy? Astrology is a type of fortune telling. Astrology falls under fortune telling. All kinds of fortune telling is haram to learn and teach. Whether you're looking into the stars, whether you're reading palms, whether you're reading tarot cards, whether you are throwing bones like dice, whether you look into a cup of coffee, whether you dangle a string, whether you dangle a key from a string. You know about that one? Some of them, they would dangle a key from a string. And he would have a genie who works with him. And then, well, you wouldn't see the genie, but you'll see the key will start going to the right or to the left. All of that is haram. Whether he claims to tell you your fortune, whether he claims to tell you where your lost items are, whether he claims to be able to contact your dead relatives, all of that is haram. There is also knowledge that Allah has reserved for himself. And claiming to have that knowledge is blasphemy. Like claiming to know everything. That's blasphemy. Or that someone else knows everything. That's what some people say about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They say Allah made him know everything. That's blasphemy. That's shirk. Or claiming to know when Judgment Day will occur. The mere attempt to decipher when Judgment Day occurs is blasphemy. Just trying to find out when it occurs is blasphemy. Prophets and angels are granted some knowledge of the unseen without being mistaken. And saints might know some of the unseen, but they could be mistaken. You said in the West African community, there are people who claim to work with numbers. For example, they count your age or the day you were born and match you with a potential spouse in the same number. I haven't heard about this. I don't have a comment. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, قُلْ لَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ الْغَيْبَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Say, O Muhammad, whoever is in the skies and the earth does not know all the unseen. Only Allah knows all of it. Some people might say, no one knows any of the unseen, only Allah. And they might use an ayah like this for that claim. That's not the case though. There are some who know some of the unseen. That's for sure. How did Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam say so many prophecies? How did he tell so many prophecies? That's what you'd say to somebody who denies that the Prophet knows any of the unseen. What's correct is that no one knows all of the unseen but Allah. And it's valid for us to say a broad statement. It's valid for us to say no one knows the unseen but Allah. That statement is valid, but it's a broad statement. It's also valid to say no one knows all of the unseen but Allah. And it's valid to say some of the slaves of Allah know some of the unseen. It is not possible to contact one's dead relatives. Unless you go to his grave and Allah gave him life in his grave and then he spoke to you from the grave because he's a saint, for example. That's possible. But you're not going to summon his spirit to come and talk to you. Muslim narrated that Zayd ibn Arqam reported that the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa' wa du'a'in la yusma' wa nafsin la tashba' wa qalbin la yakhsha'. That's a nice dua for you. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa'. Oh Allah, certainly I seek refuge with you from knowledge without benefit. Wa du'a'in la yusma', and from a supplication unheard. Wa nafsin la tashba'. Unheard means unaccepted. A supplication unaccepted. Wa nafsin la tashba'. And from an insatiable self, that means a self that's never satisfied. وَقَلْبٍ لَا يَخْشَعْ, and from a heart fearless of God. Those are amongst the things that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sought refuge from. Created knowledge is either necessary or inferred. Eternal knowledge is neither necessary nor inferred. They are unalike. So created knowledge is either necessary, that means automatic, that means it's born in you without you being able to push it away from yourself. Some knowledge that is created within you without you being able to push it away from yourself. You are unable to be willfully ignorant about what's necessarily known. You heard of willful ignorance? That means you're intentionally being ignorant about something. What's necessarily known, you can't be willfully ignorant about it. It will be born in you and you will know. You said, are we talking about the Muslim or non-Muslim? I'm not sure what you're asking me about. You said, when a person says, I speak to my dead mom every day, is this permissible to do if a person doesn't believe their dead mother hears them? It's possible to speak to someone who can't hear you. Doesn't mean speaking to him, talking to someone, like if someone says in his own place and someone else is in a grave somewhere, oh Father, oh my loved one, oh my wife, oh my child. So he's addressing someone who can't hear. There's no problem with that. That's not haram. This Wahhabi belief that you can't address someone who can't hear you. It's Wahhabi conviction that addressing someone who can't hear you is shirk. They went so far as to say it's blasphemy. You'd be a kafir according to them. Even if they can't hear you doesn't mean that it's haram. Addressing someone who cannot hear you is not haram, and addressing someone who can't hear you doesn't mean you worship them. So in the grave could be a Muslim or could be kafir. Perhaps you were in a recent lesson that we had when we mentioned the story of Abdullah bin Umar. He said he went on a trip by himself and he passed by a cemetery and a dead man came out of his grave ignited in flames, and he said, "Ya Abdullah hisqini, oh Abdullah, give me a drink." And he said, I don't know if he knew me because his name is Abdullah, or if he was just using a word that the Arabs used to say. And then another dead man came up out of the grave, out of the ground, and he put a rope around the first one and dragged him back down. And he said, "Abdullah, this one is a kafir." And Abdullah, he told the Prophet about that. And the Prophet ﷺ did not say that he was a liar. You said necessary knowledge is what you are born with? No, because you're born without knowledge in the first place. Allah Ta'ala says, "Wallahu akhrajakum min butuni ummahatikum la ta'lamuna shay'a." Allah brings you out of the bellies of your mothers not knowing anything. Your knowledge when you come out of your mother's belly is zero. Necessary knowledge, I told you, is a knowledge that's born in you. I didn't say you're born with it. It's a knowledge that will happen in you. That's what born in you means. It occurs in you. You don't have to decide to want to know it or not. It will happen to you, this necessary knowledge. You can't stop yourself from knowing it. You won't be able to be willfully ignorant about it. We're going to explain. As you can see here, we have a whole title there. It will come. Can you see my screen? It's right there. We didn't even get to the title yet. Maybe you can't see my screen. So created knowledge is either necessary or inferred. Eternal knowledge is neither necessary nor inferred. They are unalike. So necessary knowledge. Now we're going to explain. What's that? Linguistically, the daruri, the necessity, is indispensable. That's what daruri means. Indispensable. And also it means granted. Daruri means granted. Like you might be saying something to a person that's very obvious. Like say you said to him, well, fire is hot. So he says to you, daruri. It means, yani, that's known, it's granted. Or what's intuitive. Daruri means sometimes what's intuitive. And what that means is what is understood without thinking. Something understood without thinking is going to be called daruri. And that is the relevant meaning here. That which is understood without thinking about it. This is a type of knowledge that creatures have. Therefore, necessary knowledge is what does not depend upon contemplation or inference. Necessary knowledge is what does not depend upon contemplation or inference. Contemplation means thinking. Inference means concluding, deducing. Necessary knowledge does not require thinking, and it does not require deducing. By mere exposure, the human is compelled to realize it. Like someone's in the room with you, and he is unable to resist knowing it. What if someone showed you something you didn't want to see? So once he showed it to you, then you saw it, now you know it, and then you'd say, hey, why'd you show me that? Because you didn't want to know. You wanted to be ignorant about it. Now you're unable, because by mere exposure, you knew it. That's necessary knowledge. You said, for example, we need air to breathe. Let me finish here. Maybe it will come clear for you. By mere exposure, the human is compelled to realize it, and he's unable to resist knowing it. It is knowledge born through sound senses, or successively mass transmitted information and intuition. So, knowledge that is born through sound senses. Sound senses, you know your sound senses. 5 senses there are. Well, you know your senses. Hearing, sight, smell, touch, and taste. 5 senses. So when your senses are sound, then by mere exposure to something by your senses, merely detecting it through sound senses, like someone knocks on your door, then you're going to know someone knocked on your door. You can't stop yourself from knowing someone knocked on your door when you hear them knocking on your door. Like if you sat down on a warm chair. If you sat down on a warm chair, what are you going to know? That's a question for you. What do you know? What do you know for sure if you sat down on a warm chair? Who can tell us? That the chair is warm. That's right. Correct. Correct answer. That the chair is warm. What do you think I was waiting for someone to say, and then I was going to tell them, no, you're wrong? What do you suppose someone might assume there? If you sat down on a warm chair. It's not assuming it's a warm chair. It is a warm chair. How's he assuming it's a warm chair? It is a warm chair. But what would he assume if he sat down on a warm chair? Assume means doesn't have evidence. Yes, that someone was sitting there. For example, that's just an example, but that's probably closest thing that comes to mind. If he sat down on a warm chair, what might he assume? He might say, hey, someone was sitting here because it's warm. But does he know someone was sitting there? He doesn't know. Right, not necessarily. Yeah, maybe somebody put a hot pot on there. Maybe someone was cooking, had a hot pot. He needed to put the pot down on the chair for a minute. And then he picked it up and he left. And then you came and sat down there and it was a warm chair. Doesn't mean somebody was sitting there. So what do you know when you sit down on the warm chair? What you know is that it's warm. How do you know? Because you feel it. Can you stop yourself from knowing that it's warm? You cannot stop yourself from knowing that. This is called ilm daruri, necessary knowledge. It is a knowledge that is born in you. You cannot push it away. You cannot resist it. It is knowledge born through sound senses or successively mass transmitted information and intuition, like knowing that someone is in the room with you because you see him, for example, or knowing that China exists without having been there. How do you know that? Through successively mass transmitted information. We'll talk about what that means, inshallah. Or knowing that some of something is less than all of it. How would you know that some of something is less than all of it? By intuition. You're just going to know it immediately. You're going to know that 1 is less than 2 immediately. You don't have to think about it. This is called necessary knowledge. That's a knowledge that happens to creations. The knowledge of God is not like that. You say, why is it necessary if it can be wrong? What might be wrong? Like what? Which one is wrong? Which one can be wrong? Which one? Which example I gave you is something that could be wrong? Intuition. Then if that's your question, means you need to ask me how to define intuition. Because what I'm telling you is that this is not going to be wrong. Necessary knowledge can't be wrong. Intuition means here, it doesn't mean a gut feeling. Intuition here means the most basic function of the mind. Most basic function of the mind. Like knowing that some of something is less than all of it. You know it intuitively. You need to go to school to know that some of something is less than all of it? You don't. Do you need to be a genius? No, even the animals know that. Or some of them. Like the cat or the dog would know that one of the babies is missing. Even though, the cat's not going to do a math problem, or a dog's not going to do a math problem though. Math problem is thinking. Intuitive, what's known intuitively, it means you don't have to think about it. It's not by thinking. You will know it immediately. You said is it possible for it to be wrong? What's that? You said to me that's kind of contradictory. So what's contradiction? Tell me. You said the most basic function of the human mind and then thinking. You said the function of the mind is to think. That's what you think. The mind has more than one. The mind works in more than one way. You said here, is it possible for it to be wrong? Is it possible for what to be wrong? In Arabic, it's called badiha. Badiha means immediate. It's not possible to be wrong because knowledge means to know something as it is. What I'm saying in English as I'm calling it intuition, the Arabic word is badiha. Badiha means immediate. It's instant, instantaneous. In this case, instantaneous, yani. The mind has a most basic function, has also higher function though. Mind has a basic function, works by itself without you having to think. Ya ikhlas. If that part doesn't work, you're not even going to be able to think. If that first level there doesn't work, you're not going to be able to think in the first place. Yani, after that, your mind is going to process for you. Mind is a processor. It's working. You don't need an intention to make your mind work. Thinking's going to be something you do actively. When you think, that means you're putting your own effort into it. You're juggling ideas. You're investigating. Thinking is like investigating. But the mind works without you investigating too. Because mind's a processor. Unless you're crazy, your processor's broken. You say, is it possible for people to have two different levels of intuition? Don't be stuck on the word intuition. So it's badiha. Badiha is the most immediate function of the mind. If you want, when these words, yani, if you have a question about some of the words I'm using in English, you can ask me, where are you getting this word from? What's the Arabic word you're taking from? So the Arabic word is badiha. Badiha means immediate. Mind has two things. Mind on one level works intuitively. That means basically just does what it does. It's there. It's just like your eyes. You're going to open your eyes and not see? Or you need to think about it so that you can see? You're going to open your eyes and see. Yeah, like that. Badiha. Also, the mind also is like that. That means some things, when they're on a basic level, not a complex level, some things your mind will decipher them immediately. That's what it does. It's like you open your eyes and you see. Some things will come. You'll be exposed to them and your mind will immediately give it a judgment. You don't have to think about it. And I gave you an example. Like knowing that some of something is less than all of it. That's immediate. You don't need to think about that. Take the examples I'm giving you and dwell on them. Don't get stuck on the English words though. Intuition can be used in more than one way. Some things are intuitive. The word intuition or intuitive, it works. I'm not using it incorrectly, but if you don't want to use it, you can say badiha. You said, does the existence of God fall under badiha? Well, some scholars said yes. Some scholars said no. Our sheikh said for some yes and for some no. Then one brother asked me, how's that? How could it be for some yes and for some no? My answer to him is, this means some people are smarter than other people. So some people, because their minds are very good, then they knew the existence of God. They didn't have to think about it. And some people, their minds weren't as fine, so they had to think about it. And then they knew the existence of God. Hadi, you asked. Can we finish the lesson and then ask? You asked the question. Khalas, we finished the lesson now. The hour's up. That's fine though. I did say I want to try to go not fast. He said, doesn't one make a personal choice, though, to not believe or accept the existence of God? Yeah, but sometimes he will deny what he knows. Meaning he knows something, but he doesn't accept it. Yeah, that's in the Quran. And actually, that point would be, it's not in this book. That point deserves to be in this book. Someone could know something, but not accept what he knows. And the proof for that is that Allah Ta'ala says, يَعْرِفُونَهُ كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاءَهُمْ. The Jews know Muhammad like they know their own children. But do they believe in him? They don't believe in him. He said, is this a difference between Maturidis and Ash'ari, that whether knowing God is intuitive or not? I haven't learned that this is a difference between them, between Maturidis and Ash'ari. I just know that it's difference between some of the theologians. Even Ash'ari could have differences amongst themselves, and Maturidis could have differences amongst themselves. Yes, you can ask me. Go ahead and ask. He said, if one hopes that he didn't commit any kufr that he doesn't know the judgment of yet, does this doubt affect him if he really didn't commit any kufr? Throw this question away. This is West West's question. If a person knows what's kufr and what's not kufr, and he said the shahada, he's a Muslim, that's enough for this question to be nothing. If someone asks me that, I'm going to tell him, did you learn what's blasphemy and what's not blasphemy? He says, yes. I tell him, you said the shahada? He says, yes. I'll tell him, stop there. You say, can I take philosophy class for school for credit and to know how these people think, so maybe I can be ready to get asked stuff like that in the future? Yeah, there's going to be people who learn about philosophy, so that's how we knew about philosophy. We learned about it. Depends on the approach to it. It depends on the intention. It's possible, in other words, let me just say, it is possible that a person could learn philosophy with this intention. It's possible. I don't have an answer for you in particular. I just have a general answer. It is possible that a person could learn about philosophy, for example, so that he knows what they say. Yes. It might be that the person is in a program, he has no way around it. So then he goes in there. But what we learned is reading in books of philosophy without having enough knowledge to protect yourself is haram. So if that's your case, you can't do it. Same thing for other books, like books of blasphemy, like reading in a Bible. If you don't have enough knowledge to protect yourself, reading the Bible is haram. If you don't have enough knowledge to protect yourself, reading books of philosophy is haram. Even if you go to university, that's not going to stop that from being haram when you don't have enough knowledge to protect yourself. Let me go back to your question here, Musa. He asked me, someone he hopes he didn't commit any kufr that he doesn't know. Right there, this is West West. Right there. I hope I didn't commit any blasphemy I don't know. All you have to do is say the shahada anyway, if you know what's blasphemy and what's not blasphemy. So you don't dwell on things like that. Enough knowledge to protect yourself means you're not going to commit blasphemy. Doesn't mean you necessarily know how to refute it. You might not know the answers, but at least you know that's wrong, and you're not going to commit blasphemy, and you're not going to get confused. You're not going to become doubtful about your religion. Tayyib, do you have any other question for me? So we'll start next week, inshallah, with inferred knowledge. This is the other one. This is not immediate. Inferred is when you have to think, when you're actively thinking. We didn't talk about that yet, Yani. We didn't read this yet. He said, a non-Muslim asked me, why do people refer to God as he instead of she? Well, first of all, pronouns are needed for speech. You're going to use pronouns normally. And then, which pronoun we're going to use? We're going to use pronoun that complies with what God said. God referred to himself as Huwa. You're welcome. You said if the non-Muslim then says that means that God refers to himself as a male, then what do we say? You say, no, it doesn't. You say to him, that's merely your ignorance of the language. You think you know about the language well, but you don't. Now that answer I gave you, he might say, what do you mean I don't know? I would say to him, you don't know. You don't know that something that doesn't have a gender might be called he or she? So if he says, no, I don't know that, I'll say, see, you don't know. If he says yes, I'll say, then what are you asking? What are you acting like you don't know for? You say to him, do you know that something without a gender might be called he or she? So it's yes or no. If he says, yes, I know that, tell him, why are you acting like you don't know? If he says no, you tell him, so I told you, you don't know. That's like people who say, don't say he, say he or she. You don't have to say he or she. You can say he, it means he or she. Why people now say he or she? Because they're taking their language from people who are not linguists. So they put a burden on themselves. They say he or she. You can just say he. You don't even have to say they. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.